This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so the meeting has been called to order. And then, is there anyone on the line from the public that wants to make a public comment? Going once, going twice, public comment? All right, no public comment. So then the next item on the agenda is to approve the meeting minutes of the last meeting I think in January. People should have received the minutes. I believe I got them. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
And second? Well, I'll second that. So any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, so the meeting minutes are approved. So the next part is in the hands of Eric and a cast of thousands. So Eric, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, John. So welcome back, everybody, to our annual budget process. So to kick us off, I'll walk through our plan of attack on this. And as you all may or may not remember from previous years, we like to split this across several meetings. We attempted 2 in the past. It's been 3 for the past couple of years, and that seemed to have worked better. So we're not as rushed. So today we're going to talk through program targets and organizational targets. We'll talk through revenues. Our next meeting, which is on June the 9th, we'll talk through the expenses of the organization, and we'll go towards sustainability. I think it's really important that we revisit that as we're approaching some of those targets that we set out in that sustainability plan with Commissioner Smith during the raids a couple of years ago. And so I just want to come back to that. And then at the final meeting on 6/16, we'll present the consolidated budget. We'll talk through the cash flows, the balance sheet projections, and then ideally we'll get a recommendation from the committee to the board. Any questions or concerns on that, the approach?
So we're going to do the committee recommendation at the end of the entire.
At the end of the entire thing.
Right? Okay.
All right. So for today, let's start off with the targets. So kind of what have we done? What have we done for you lately? So first 9 years of the Connecticut Green Bank from fiscal year 2012 through 2020, 9 years, we had a target of 52,000 projects, a cumulative target of $1.9 billion deployed, 469 megawatts installed capacity, and we've come pretty close to those targets, especially back when we were doing the stretch targets. It's good to see how close we've come, and some we've actually exceeded. We've delivered 49,000 projects. We've delivered $2 billion in capital deployment. We've installed 425 megawatts. And you'll see this is about as excited as I get in typeface, but we have crossed that $2 billion mark. And for the last full year that we had, for fiscal 2020, we had a target of 8,600 projects. We delivered about 8,450. We deployed $414 million with a target of 296. And we installed 74.5 megawatts with a target of 77 megawatts. And I just want to present the last full year as we start to talk about this year that we're about 80% of the way through. So for fiscal 21, we had a bit of a scaled back target due to COVID of 5,100 projects. We've delivered 6,500 thus far, $175 million of capital deployment, and so far 214 million, and 53.5 megawatts have been installed versus a target of 48. So 2021 is shaping up to be a better year than we had initially thought it might be.
So Eric, could I just ask, in 2020, we did $414 million worth of projects. The target had been like just shy of 300 million. So why? How did we? I mean, that's a pretty significant.
There were a couple of projects that were skewing that. The one in particular, there was that I'm thinking of. There was a large multifamily project. The overall financing was large. The energy portion was not as big, and the way that we had been doing that methodology, we were counting the whole project. We're working with the multifamily team to go back and just account for the energy portions, so that will come down a bit.
Okay.
So moving on to what are we proposing for FY22. So this past year we did ranges of targets because we didn't really have we did a best case and a worst case, and we figured it'd come in somewhere in there, and it has for the most part. But we're going back to away from the ranges to firm targets. You're going to see smaller targets for the organization, and that's due to the forecasting of the sunset of RSIP at some point in this next fiscal year, either due to reaching capacity or if there is an extension from the legislature. We expect that to carry till January of 2022 when the tariff will be in place. And you'll see that we're continuing to include emissions numbers, and these aren't really targets. It's more just to demonstrate the impact that we're intending to make. So moving on, I'll now go on to our two business lines. So starting with the financing programs, we're expecting to deliver 902 projects. And despite what I just said about a decrease, that is an increase year on year. It's a decrease year on year in terms of targets. But let me go through program by program. Starting with CPACE, we're expecting an increase as business starts to pick back up. And this is based off of our pipeline and conversations with third parties and what they're currently developing. So we're expecting to do 44 projects for $23 million and 6.5 megawatts of installed capacity in here, and which certainly seems achievable. In terms of the PPA, we're expecting to do 42 projects for $25 million and 13.5 megawatts installed, or 13.4. This is representative of what's in our pipeline, and which is driven predominantly by our MAP offering, our Marketplace Assistance Program, where we've been working with municipalities and with the state to get PPA signed. We're also expecting this to continue to grow by working with third-party developers, so both that are coming to the Green Bank that are looking for someone to own that, and we'll sell that into whichever fund, or they want to continue to own it, but they need us to help them finance, where we ultimately end up lending to those developer owners, like we have with Sunview. The other shift with the PPA is we are working with Inclusive Prosperity Capital with regards to the multifamily offerings, and we really feel that we haven't seen the growth that is possible out of the multifamily sector and the PPA, and so we're working with them to really expand on this there. So we've included a a lower target that include for that within this internally, with the expectation that we'll be growing pipeline for FY23 in the multifamily space. Moving on to, moving on to SBEA, you'll see that we're looking at 818 projects for $14 million. That's an increase in what we've done this year, which has been harder due to COVID, but we're expecting that to really come back, that the offerings from the utilities are still going to be sweeter than they have been in the past, but we're hoping that due to where things are in the business cycle, this is a more achievable target. Last year, or this current fiscal year, our target was around 1,000 projects, I believe, for SBEA. And that was basically what the utility was giving us is, hey, we can totally achieve this. We've discounted this a bit this year. And we're also including in this the assumption that we get the new Business Energy Advantage program and help finance that with Eversource. So we're more comfortable with this target, even in light of not meeting the target last year or this year on it. Moving on to multifamily, our targets here are remaining kind of at the levels that we've seen this present year. So we don't expect any pre-development projects coming through. And our term offering, we expect to be kind of about where they are this year. So we're expecting 4 projects. There will be some overlap with the multifamily PPA. And we expect there to be 1 Lime loan done, and that's based off of what's in the pipeline. Again, this is more about the Lime loan isn't going away. We feel that it's better to expend our resources and work with IPC to expend their resources on new PPA projects, simply because it's easier to get them across the board, or we think our hypothesis is it should be easier to get those across the board than it has been and proven to be with new Lime loans targeting the subsection of the population that we have been. So you'll notice the line here for transportation. And that is included, that's all zeros, and I realize that, and that's not a mistake, it's just where we are at the moment. We will see this updated as we go through the budget process to have a number around emissions. And this is in reference to the carbon offsets program that we've recently launched that Matt has been working on for a couple of years, where we have been helping to monetize the offsets generated by EV chargers as a way to create an additional revenue stream that ideally will eventually work as an incentive to install more charging infrastructure. So we expect to add in an additional 18,000 tons of carbon that's going to be offset to that emissions number. So we're still refining that. Sorry, John.
No, I had looked up, I was curious, because the total tonnage is impressive, but I looked at the Connecticut numbers for total carbon emitted. I think the figure that I found was for 2017, and it was like for 40.6 million metric tons is the whole ball of wax. So even though we're doing what we can, it's the amount of carbon being released just by our state is massive.
It does feel like a drop in the barrel sometimes, but
Oh no, I mean it's totally what we need to be doing, because we need if more is not possible, we need to do what we can and to build on it. It just, I had just not realized what the numbers were. And it's just a crazy amount of carbon.
Yeah.
Well, and I have to
Yeah,
say, I
John-
thought the Bridgeport coal plant was just standing by, waiting to be, torn down and removed. And now they fired it up a couple of times um, during some cold spells this year. So
Hmm.
there's just a lot of stuff that you think is over and out of here, and it's not.
Right.
This is Brian. Another way to look at that number, John, I agree with you. This is an annual number. So this is the avoided emissions for 1 year from this portfolio
Oh,
of
yeah.
projects. If you do the lifetime value of those projects avoided emissions, our history has been about 500,000 to 1 million metric tons. So to the 40 million metric tons that you use, that's about 1.25% to 2.5% a year that we're kind of contributing to. And
Right.
we're a small piece of the overall bucket, just in terms of what we're doing. But yeah, it's I like you. I use the 40 million metric tons as kind of a rule of thumb, and everything else acts against that. Our portfolio of projects to date is 9 million metric tons over the life, and that's through fiscal year 2020. So it hasn't added 2021, as Eric is alluding to in his prior slides. But so that's roughly 25% of 1 year, given what we've done to date. But it speaks to the enormity of the problem and how much we have to continue to enable more investment.
Right. I mean, and that's kind of what I was getting at, is that it really, what we're doing is great, and I don't want to sound or cause anybody to be discouraged, but it's just like the task before remains huge.
Very true. So just coming back to the targets and wrapping up on the financing programs, we are still working on the strategic investments numbers with Bert. And Bert, we need to figure out what all you're cooking up for next year as that. But we typically do that as we're figuring out our investment numbers and targets. So how much of our money we're going to use for each of these. So any questions on the financing programs?
So do we think we'll have strategic investments, or is it hard to identify them, or
Sometimes
what
it's
is the
things
issue?
sometimes there are things that I know Bert has in the hopper that are taking a while, that we have a longer lead time on, and sometimes there are others that pop out of nowhere.
Right.
They tend to be, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, John, they tend to be lumpy, and as Eric mentions, somewhat unpredictable. But we're working on a number of initiatives right now. We also have the Capital Solutions portal, where developers and other interested parties can put their ideas. Thus far, that hasn't been as promising as we had hoped, but we have had some things come in the last 2 to 3 months, even, that we've guided them toward the portal, and we're continuing those discussions. So we're optimistic that a number of those will pan out.
Yeah, I mean, I think by their very nature, they're kind of one-off type things, but so that's good, and they involve a unique analysis in each situation, but
That's right.
it would be good, if we found some of those oddities that we could deal with.
Mhm. So with that, I will move on to the incentive programs. So you can see here the incentive programs. The biggest thing to note, as I alluded to before, was the forecast sunsetting of RSIP. And so our expectation is that the applications for new systems will come to an end in this fiscal year. The tariff starts January 1st. So it's just a matter of if there's an extension by the legislature that gets us to January, or if we hit that statutory target sometime before. If there isn't an extension, I believe that we were expecting to hit that statutory cap in sooner rather than later, so probably in August, and then the RSIP extension granted by our board would carry us pretty much for the rest of the year. So it would end up being about the same number of projects done either way. So it's about a half year of RSIP that we're looking at. You'll see another addition on here this year in terms of our battery storage program, which I think has been in targets for the past couple of years in different forms, but I think we're cautiously optimistic this year that we expect to hear a ruling from PURA sooner rather than later that will greenlight this program, and we would seek to start that in January of 22, and we would deliver 362 battery installations for $11 million and 5 megawatts of capacity. And that would also be both for residential batteries and for C&I batteries. So it would be hitting both markets. Smarty, we're looking at 800 projects for the year, so a slight increase off of what we've done thus far this year, for $11 million and 0.8 megawatts installed. And we're still expecting there to be about 12% of those to be for solar, which is in line with what we've seen this year, which is a little bit of a decrease compared to prior years. In terms of Posigen, we're looking at 328 projects for 8.4 million, 2.2 megawatts installed, and we're expecting the tracking of Posigen to stop, or the Green Bank's tracking of Posigen's performance to stop, just because it's been linked to the LMI incentive from the RSIP. So as the RSIP's coming to an end, our tracking of Posigen will also sunset at the end of the year. Are there questions or concerns on these?
And is the feeling that Posigen will continue to play well with others after we finish tracking them?
That certainly is our hope. That we hope that they will have established themselves well enough in the market that they can, that they'll be able to continue growing and expanding, even without the RSIP and the LMI incentive.
John, just to provide more context too. So we are transitioning from net metering and the RSIP to a tariff January 1st of 2022. We've reported to the board the progress that's being made in docket 200701, which is the tariff docket for both residential and non-residential tariffs. And on the residential side, we had we achieved probably beyond our expectations in terms of what we were advocating for. So per the Connecticut General Statute 16244Z, which is where the tariffs reside, on the residential side, there's no cap. So the residential doesn't have to go through any sort of competitive reverse auction format. It's open enrollment. Through the PURA docket, we demonstrated the rate of return that homeowners were achieving in the RSIP, and we were able to justify a 10% return. So per the statute, there's a just, reasonable, and adequate policy requirement. All these terms probably ring a bell for Lonnie. So PURA issued a decision that 10% rate of return is deemed reasonable. That will now become an assumption into the tariff calculator. And based on PURA's ruling, they showed in a footnote a 29 cent per kilowatt hour tariff rate for both the electricity and the renewable energy credits for the BIAL tariff. So that's a 20-year 29-cent tariff rate that those participants would be receiving in comparison to utility rates today at 21 to 23 cents. So there's a buffer there, including our RSIP, which is probably what, Sergio, an average of 2 cents per kilowatt hour on a 15-year basis, so probably 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So the tariff rate is set much higher than where the market currently is. We also advocated for adders for low income. PURA's got a priority for vulnerable communities. So there's a 2.5 cent adder for low income families. So you add that on top of the tariff. If you're a family that resides within a distressed community, that's a DECD determined definition, but aren't low income, then you can receive 1.25 cent per kilowatt hour. So all these things add up, making the economics really favorable for solar, residential solar. And then we also advocated for, through Bert's leadership, what's called a direct payment, which would be, these tariffs are based on the production of the system, not the credit quality of the host. So we advocated for what's called a direct payment, which means that the utilities could designate a portion or all of that tariff to a third party, which effectively means that we could underwrite solar PV without having to have any sort of credit check on a homeowner. It's exclusively the production of the system, and we got it. So all of these things are looking good for low to moderate income families and the solar PV market broadly, but specifically LMI. I think our challenge is to figure out, okay, with solar and battery storage and renewable heating and cooling, how can we figure out a way to package things together to support companies that are focusing on vulnerable communities and bring our financing capability to those capital structures, so that we see bigger results happening for those who truly need it. So we spent a lot of time this fiscal year in regulatory proceedings advocating for that. On the non-residential side, Mackie is focused in there. We've really focused hard. We've let the industry focus on kind of a lot of the details in terms of the reverse auction format, but we've taken a priority around trying to enable affordable multifamily to receive maximum incentives. And we've really gotten the whole process focused in on that, which is great, because what it's going to mean is that segment of the market is either going to get a carve out, they're going to get a bid preference, they're going to get an adder, or they're going to get all of the above. So we're advocating on behalf of that segment of the market where there is no nonprofits or any organizations doing that advocacy in the proceeding.
Well,
So
I
lots.
think that it's great that the Green Bank is involved in the proceedings, and then I also, just personally, I have a lot more confidence in PURA than I, not to diminish the work that people have done before, but it seems like it's a much more dynamic organization than it had been in the past. And so I think that that's helpful as well.
Yeah, I would just add that I think that Chair Gillette took Chair Reed's policy from 2017 on the grid modernization and is really running with it, Lonnie. It's become the foundation to Connecticut's version of New York Rev.
I know, it's exciting. Remember when we had Richard Kaufman
Yeah.
testify, and he was another one of the architects of that approach. So now it's exciting.
Cool. Any other questions on the incentive business targets before we transition to revenues? All right, so we'll move to revenues. So you'll see in the budget and what we sent out that as there are most years, we're forecasting a decrease in utility customer receipts from the Clean Energy Fund, and that's due to decreased electricity demand. So the energy efficiency is working. You'll see regional greenhouse gas initiatives, allowance auction prices. The income from RGGI proceeds is expected to grow, and that's due to the growth in the number of allowances and a growth in those prices. So both of which work in our favor significantly. Our interest income is increasing, and that's been due to investment activity. So we repurchased, we've done all the loans we did this year, which is growing our portfolio. We repurchased some loans from Clean Fund to do some restructures, and so that being that we now own the full loan, or the loan that's now coming to us as opposed to going to Clean Fund. And so that's all a good thing. From rec sales, we're expecting, we've locked in higher prices than we have in previous years, just due to where the rec markets are for this year's non-Shrek recs. So we're expecting to see that increase. And then for Shreks, we have an increased number of Shreks that we've done just due to new systems coming online. And as you all will recall, those are statutorily committed through the MPAs to Eversource and UI. So that's even more income that we can look to for this year. Questions or concerns?
So the net is we have more revenue.
We have more revenue.
Yeah. Okay.
We have more revenue.
Don't broadcast that too much.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Just to provide further, so what you see from the materials in the committee mailing, Jane and Eric did an excellent job bringing more kind of analysis and transparency to each of these items. So the Clean Energy Fund, which we all know from deregulation, we actually include the past 10 years of collections from both Eversource and UI, and you see a downward trend. Well, that downward trend is good. It may not lead to more revenues for us, but it means we're doing our job, which is helping families and businesses reduce their energy usage and deploying behind the meter clean energy. So that is clearly a good sign.
Right.
Now, there are ways that the utilities are having to address this by creating more load from renewable heating and cooling and electric vehicles. That this is the whole kind of cost shift, and that kind of debate comes into usage here. But Jane and Eric did a great job presenting the data here on revenues. On RGGI, the same thing. I know Jane takes great pride in kind of being up to speed and up to date on what's happening in the quarterly RGGI auctions. You can see the analysis and the materials provided about historical clearing prices and where the market is anticipated landing. So it's good when you see these kind of estimates presented in this way, because the team is just getting more and more comfortable with that side. So the first two bullets here are what we kind of call, they're kind of unearned revenues. These are like revenue sources that are determined by policy. We receive them because of policy. In our December 2017 board meeting on the sustainability plan, which we will talk to more in the next meeting, the goal with the revenues on the financing program side and the incentive program side was to generate earned revenues outside of the System Benefit Fund and RGGI that over time would pay for our operating expenses. So what you're seeing in the revenues is a great story of interest income increasing because Bert and the team are generating more loans and other things on our balance sheet that are interest income producing. And rec sales, also, we're managing those assets. So when you're generating that new revenue source, it's close, and we'll show it at the next meeting, of the operating expenses that we're covering. This was our challenge. This is what Commissioner Smith really wanted us to look at, was how much time is it going to take for us to be in a position to where those non-ratable revenues would cover the operating expenses of the organization. So we're making good progress. And just, again, the team did, a great job, even on the Shrek table or the rec table. There's a ton of data that's behind that table that the team has put out there. So it's just really good clarity on the revenue side.
Oh, I agree, but and it's also remarkable that we are where we are, considering that after the raid, I know that there was one train of thought was, well, let's continue operating the way that we are, and then we'll go bankrupt in 6 months. and the legislature will have to deal with it.
Yes.
So yeah, this is much preferable.
Certainly is. So, just to Brian's point on sustainability, we'll be circling back at the next meeting to talk about where we are with this. We certainly know where the revenues are. We're looking at where the expenses are, and then kind of how does that compare to the model. So, All right. Any other questions about revenues and where we are for the budget, or? Okay, so with that, why don't we move on to tuition reimbursement and compensation time? So I'll start by saying you'll see the annual update, which I realized as after I put it on the agenda that we had already done at the last meeting, it was so memorable we are required to inform the committee of compensation time usage in employee participation in tuition reimbursement programs. So you've now been duly informed. What I'd like to talk about today is a proposed change to this policy, which typically for employment policies, the Audit, Compliance, and Governance Committee maintains oversight of that. But being that this is an employee benefit, I really thought it would be a good idea for B&O to weigh in. And basically what we're looking to do is rejig our existing tuition reimbursement program, which has helped a bunch of employees pursue their degrees, as well as other types of training, to be more of an educational assistance policy. That this is based on some changes or some Bert's reading of the CARES Act. And I applaud Bert for actually picking up on this and bringing it to everybody's attention. The thought is basically we're able to pay tax-free for both from our perspective and from the employee's perspective up to $5,200 a year towards an employee's existing student loans. And so we wouldn't have any tax implications from a payroll tax perspective, and the employee wouldn't have to pay income tax on that. So we wanted to expand the definition of educational assistance, or rename the policy educational assistance, and expand the usage to allow employees to use some of that $10,000 a year existing benefit towards their student loans. This is something that would help us retain employees, keep them from flipping and going to the private sector, and while allowing those to continue to educate themselves and better themselves through the tuition reimbursement. And so, due to the tax situation or the tax advantages from the CARES Act, we effectively would be able to offer this benefit at a reduced cost, as opposed to giving somebody a raise to cover this per se. So what I would love is committee, ideally you guys will buy into this, and I'd love a recommendation to the board in conjunction with what we're taking to the Audit, Compliance, and Governance Committee next week for their review to update the policy in the handbook.
Well, I think it's a terrific move, and I think if I was an employee there, that I would be really grateful for this policy. And it's paying for education that people are using on the job. So I would hope, that we could. Do we do a resolution, or how do we do this?
So there is a resolution that should be in your document. I can read it off.
It's for the resolution is for a recommendation to the board, and the ACG, the Audit, Compliance, and Governance, will do the same type of review when they have their meeting next Tuesday to make a recommendation to the full board.
Well, do we need more discussion? The board members have more questions, or would we be ready to entertain a motion recommending the change at this point?
I mean, I think it's a good idea, and I think it's self-explanatory. So, does Mike have any concerns?
Are we all right, Mike?
No concerns here.
Great.
Okay, so do we have a motion?
I move that we move this recommendation.
I'll second.
And do we have a second?
Yeah,
I'll
Mike just
second.
seconded.
Okay, so the motion has been made and seconded to recommend the policy change on tuition payments. So any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
So moved.
Yes, so, all right. So it's, so that has been moved, and, we can inform the board, and also you can inform the other committee.
I will do that.
All right, do
thank
we
you
have
for
any
that.
other business before us?
That's all for today from my perspective, unless the committee has anything else.
No, I don't have any outstanding tuition payments, so I'm not going to recommend that the board get reimbursed. But so A motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
And I'll second it, and I'll just say that it was carried unanimously. So,
Sounds good.
thank you, everyone, and thank you especially to Eric and your team and Jane, and you are, as always, brilliant. So thank you.
Thank you.
I second that.
Yes. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.